Hello friends. Today's story does not begin with blood or sirens or a name whispered in fear. It begins quietly, the way all long nightmares do, with the sense that something is wrong, but not yet visible. Like standing alone in the woods at dusk, when the air suddenly feels heavier and you can't explain why. Somewhere, far off, a decision has already been made, and time has already started bending toward it. Hello friends, welcome to Crime Chronicles US, where America's unsolved mysteries, vanished criminals, and chilling cases come alive. Every story is real, every detail matters, and the truth remains buried in the shadows. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to stay updated with every mystery. There is a particular stillness to the Pacific Northwest, especially in the years before the world learned to watch itself. The forests were thick and patient, the rivers wide and cold, the highways stretching like ribbons of opportunity and escape. In those years, people believed disappearance was temporary, that someone always turned up eventually, that bad things happened somewhere else. That belief settled over King County like a fog, and it allowed a man to move through ordinary days without being noticed, without being questioned, without being remembered. Gary Leon Ridgway grew up in a home where silence carried weight. His mother was strict, controlling, obsessive about cleanliness, especially about dirt and sin. His father was distant, often angry, a man whose presence filled rooms without warmth. As a child, Gary learned early that love was conditional and approval was rare. He learned that shame could be handed down without explanation, that punishment could come without warning, and that emotions were safer when buried deep enough that even he could not feel them. There were warning signs, though no one called them that at the time. Bedwetting that lasted far longer than normal. Fascinations that lingered in dark corners of his mind. Fantasies he did not have language for, but which returned again and again, quietly carving grooves in his thoughts. He was not a child anyone fought to save, nor one anyone feared. He was simply there, existing, absorbing, watching. By the time he reached adulthood, Gary Ridgway had learned something critical about the world. If you act normal enough, people stop looking closely. He learned how to speak softly, how to smile when expected, how to hold a job and attend church and appear unremarkable. Normalcy became a mask, so convincing that even those closest to him rarely questioned what lay beneath it. The first murders did not announce themselves. There was no immediate pattern anyone recognized. Young women vanished. Many were runaways. Some were involved in sex work. Some were simply trying to survive. Society had already trained itself not to look too hard at their absence. When someone is labeled disposable, their disappearance becomes easier to explain away. The Green River wound through the landscape like a dark vein, carrying secrets no one could hear it whisper. Bodies began to appear near its banks, sometimes submerged, sometimes hidden beneath branches and earth, as if the land itself were trying to bury the truth. Investigators knew they were dealing with something unprecedented, but knowledge alone did not bring clarity. The killer was patient. He did not rush. He did not panic. He blended. Gary Ridgway drove the same roads as everyone else. He worked as a truck painter, a job that allowed him to move freely, to know industrial areas and remote locations, to understand where no one lingered long. He learned which streets were watched and which were forgotten. He learned how to talk to women without alarming them, how to sound helpful, how to sound kind. He learned that trust once given, could be used. What makes this story difficult is not just the number of lives taken, but the ordinariness of the man who took them. Ridgway did not fit the popular image of a monster. He was not charismatic. He was not brilliant. He was not particularly violent in public. He was consistent, methodical, and empty in a way that allowed repetition without reflection. Investigators chased countless leads. Composite sketches were drawn. Task forces expanded and collapsed under the weight of frustration. The case became one of the largest serial murder investigations in American history, not because the killer was invisible, but because he understood how to hide in plain sight. He inserted himself into the investigation, volunteered information, passed polygraph tests, attended church, married and remarried, all while continuing to kill. There is something deeply unsettling about the passage of time in this story. Years passed, seasons changed, families waited, mothers aged while daughters never did. The world moved forward and the killer moved with it, untouched. The idea that evil announces itself loudly is comforting, but false. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it wears work boots and a wedding ring. Ridgway's victims were not numbers, though history would later reduce them to counts. They were people with habits and fears and unfinished sentences. They trusted a stranger for a moment, because survival sometimes requires believing in small mercies. Each time, that belief was exploited. Each time, the forest grew heavier with silence. The Green River Task Force faced criticism, internal conflict, and public pressure. Technology lagged behind the need. DNA science was still finding its footing. Evidence existed, but it waited, dormant, like a locked door without a key. And so the killer continued, confident, not because he believed himself superior, but because experience taught him he could. In interviews years later, Ridgway would describe his crimes with chilling flatness. No poetry, no remorse, just facts delivered as if discussing weather or traffic. That flatness was not accidental. It was the result of decades spent disconnecting action from consequence, humanity from desire. When a person practices indifference long enough, it becomes effortless. The community lived alongside a ghost without realizing it. People waved to him, worked beside him, prayed next to him. They discussed the murders on the news while sharing meals with the man responsible. This is not a failure of intelligence or morality. It is a reminder of how deeply we rely on appearances to keep us feeling safe. As the 1990s progressed, the killings slowed. Whether this was due to age, circumstance, or shifting impulses remains debated. What is certain is that the silence did not bring closure. Uncertainty is its own kind of violence. Families were left suspended in not knowing, replaying last conversations, imagining endings they hoped were wrong. Then, quietly, science caught up. A sample, a comparison, a match that could no longer be ignored. The past reached forward and closed its hand around a man who had believed himself finished with consequences. In 2001, Gary Ridgway was arrested, not in dramatic fashion, but calmly, efficiently, the way the truth often arrives after taking its time. But arrest is not the same as understanding, and confession is not the same as explanation. When Ridgway began to speak, The scope of what he revealed reshaped the case entirely. The number grew. The timeline stretched. The land itself seemed to exhale as secrets long buried were dragged back into the light. What happens when a man spends decades killing without being stopped? What does that say about him? And what does it say about the world that allowed it? These are questions without clean answers. Questions that linger long after trials end and headlines fade. Because the most unsettling part is not that Gary Ridgway killed, or even how many he killed. It is that for so long, nothing stopped him. And that realization settles slowly, like nightfall, leaving you standing in the same place, wondering how much darkness can exist before anyone truly sees it. The courtroom did not feel like a place where justice lived. It felt like a waiting room between worlds, a space where the past sat heavily in the air and refused to move on. When Gary Ridgway entered, there was no dramatic shift, no visible crack in his composure. He looked smaller than the legend that had grown around him, older, worn down by time rather than guilt. The monster people imagined did not arrive. Instead, a man did, carrying decades of death inside him, as if it were nothing more than extra weight. When he spoke, it was not to explain himself, because there was nothing he wanted explained. He talked because it was required, because cooperation bought him something he valued more than truth: control over how the story ended. He began to describe places first: roads, clearings, riverbanks, as if geography mattered more than the lives that ended there. His memory was disturbingly precise, not because he honored it, but because repetition had burned it in. In fact, investigators listened, some with anger, some with exhaustion, some with the quiet dread that comes when answers create more questions than they resolve. Each confession opened a door to another disappearance, another family that would finally know why waiting had never brought anyone home. Closure is often described as healing, but in this room, it felt more like confirmation of a wound that would never close. Ridgway described his methods without urgency: strangulation, silence, control. He spoke of returning to the bodies, of revisiting places where he had left people behind, not out of remorse, but because they belonged to him in his mind. Ownership mattered. Power mattered. The absence of empathy was complete. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just absolute. What disturbed many was not only what he did, but how little emotion accompanied the telling. There were no visible cracks, no breakdowns, no moments of self-awareness. His words landed like dull instruments, each one heavy, each one final. This was not a man haunted by what he had done. This was a man inconvenienced by consequences. Families sat and listened, some hearing names spoken aloud for the first time in years. Others learned that their missing loved one would never be identified, that the land had taken what evidence remained. There is a unique cruelty in that kind of truth. It offers certainty without comfort, knowledge without peace. Ridgway pleaded guilty to 48 murders, later admitting to more, though the exact number will never be known. The plea spared him the death penalty. In exchange, he gave details, locations, names when he remembered them, silence where memory failed. The bargain was practical, efficient, deeply unsatisfying to those who wanted suffering to match suffering. During sentencing, he was allowed to speak. He said little of value. No apology that carried weight. No acknowledgement of the humanity he erased. His words felt rehearsed, borrowed, empty. When the judge responded, the room shifted. The voice was firm, controlled, unyielding. The sentence was life in prison without the possibility of parole. Not once, but again and again. A symbolic stacking of permanence meant to mirror the permanence of loss. Ridgway did not react. No visible anger, no relief, just acceptance, as if this outcome had always been part of the plan. He was escorted away, not to death, but to obscurity, to a cell where time would stretch endlessly without audience or admiration. Prison stripped him of the ordinary freedoms he once used as camouflage. There were no roads to drive, no forests to visit, no strangers to approach. The world shrank to concrete and routine. For most people, that kind of confinement would feel unbearable. For Ridgway, it was simply another environment to adapt to. Years passed. The case faded from headlines. New horrors claimed attention. But the impact remained, embedded in families, in the geography of the Pacific Northwest, in the way communities learned to be cautious in a world that once felt safer. The river still flowed. The forests still stood. But they carried memory now, even if no one spoke of it aloud. What lingers most is not the violence itself, but the lesson it refuses to let go of. Evil does not always announce itself with chaos. Sometimes it arrives early to work, pays its bills, blends into church pews and grocery store lines. Sometimes it survives because no one wants to believe it could be that close. Gary Ridgway did not see himself as a symbol. He saw himself as successful. He measured his life not by connection or meaning, but by how long he got away with it. That is perhaps the most disturbing truth of all. Not that he killed, but that he believed the absence of interruption was victory. In the end, there was no transformation, no moment of clarity, no redemption arc. Just an aging man in a prison cell, remembered not for who he was, but for what he destroyed. His name became shorthand for a failure of systems, of assumptions, of the belief that monsters are easy to spot. The victims remain, not as numbers, but as absences that shaped the lives around them. Birthdays uncelebrated, futures never tested, voices frozen in memory at the age they disappeared. That is where the real weight of this story lives, not in the killer, but in the space he left behind. And so the story ends, not with his silence, but with ours, with the uncomfortable awareness that darkness does not need permission, only opportunity. And that vigilance is not paranoia, but remembrance. The Green River keeps moving, carrying nothing now but water and reflection, while the past stays where it has always been, just beneath the surface, waiting for those willing to look long enough to see it. So friends, if you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Crime Chronicles US for more chilling unsolved mysteries from across America. Stay curious, and we'll see you in the next story.